Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today.
Box sets are now available via Open Athens and other international federated access with library institutional subscriptions packages at £1,950 a year. Individual subscriptions are also available at £8.99 a month and just £4.99 a month for students.
Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Feely, midwife, researcher and lecturer at King's College London. I'm delighted to share with you an upcoming event, a conference devoted to personalised maternity care on Wednesday, the 8th of June. Learning from current practice with birthing women and people's needs centred, we will explore how personalised maternity care can be facilitated. Safe care is personalised care. Therefore, to support the implementation of the immediate and essential actions, this programme will share insights from national, regional and individual trusts, as well as individual maternity practitioners. Sharing from all levels of the maternity system, this conference adopts a whole systems approach to making personalised care a reality for all. A must-attend programme for senior maternity and midwifery managers, clinicians, trust governors, risk managers, academics, researchers, regulators and safety and clinical excellence groups, as well as charities, all tasked with implementing improvement to maternity care in the UK. We look forward to seeing you there.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to, this is the second episode of the 7th series of Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald, if you haven't met me before, hi. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hours and for the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing, actually, not just chairing, but speaking this evening. So we're doing it slightly differently this evening. So we're going to have some real highlights, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And I'm going to be talking myself, which would be very nice as a change. And we are preparing, as I'm sure many of you are rushing around, preparing for the International Day of the Midwife tomorrow. Some events are starting in our time tonight. So I know people are very busy and very excited, and it's really fantastic. And I'm just want to welcome you again to the Maternity Hour. Now, you'll know, if you're a regular viewer, that these started at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, and it was a way of us being able to link together and talk together and learn, especially about COVID, but also more about current awareness and getting our continuing professional development keeping on in a nice digestible way. Fantastic source, because of course we're looked after by Matflix. Everything is recorded, and so if you miss anything, you don't really miss it. You just have to go to Matflix and find whatever you're wanting, whatever you've missed, and then catch up. And you can share with colleagues, and you can, in fact, we love you to share. And if you're doing any revalidation events, or if you're trying to look at an assignment for a piece of work, it's all there. It's fantastic. It's very up to date and very delicious. So do have a look at it when you've got some time. Now, I just need to say, as always, a big thank you to our wonderful NHS colleagues, wherever you are. If you're off duty, thank you for what you're doing. Have a good rest. And if you're on duty, make the most of the time you've got here with us. And a big thank you, of course, to people who are providing care, some of whom have been unwell, some of whom are covering for people who've been unwell and not able to be there and absent. and you're carrying on giving that quality care to women, their babies and families. And so thank you for all that you're doing. It's fantastic. And I just want to say a big, and I know I always say this, but I really do mean this, look after yourselves, because if you don't look after yourselves, you're going to fall down somewhere. So take care of yourselves, make sure you're getting your vitamins, make sure you're eating properly, not too much chocolate, though a little chocolate will do you good. Okay, I've got just a little bit of news. And of course, this week it's Eid, and I have to say Eid Mubarak, and I think I've got the pronunciation correctly, but you'll tell me if I'm not, to say Eid al-Fitr. I think that's correct. And it's so nice to know that our friends who are celebrating will be having lovely feasts and family time and really enjoying this time in the next few days. So enjoy, you will do. And of course, it's Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and there's lots and lots of events going on. There's quite a lot going on things like Baby Buddy. There's also a new RCM iLearn module on mental health, really good. And check out the Motherhood group, also really good resource for you. There's lots of exciting events going on the International Day of the Midwife, and including the International, International Day, which is a 24-hour event, which is starting for tomorrow. And it started, actually, there's something going on at 8 o'clock immediately after this. So I will direct you to that at the end of the evening. And so don't miss anything. Now you'll notice I'm in Ukraine colours as ever, and we need to be thinking about our colleagues and our friends there and all the people who are suffering at the moment. And we hope this war will be ended very soon. And I'm going to say now that because it's Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week this week, we are going to replay one of the sessions from Michelle, who spoken a few weeks back, because we thought it would be very timely to have that playing. And then we're going to follow that with Faiza, who talked about different things for supporting different groups of women. And we thought that would also be very useful. So hopefully, well, I should be able to say cue the videos that are going to carry on now. But if you've seen them, see them again. They're worth it. They've got lots of really good information there. But also stay on afterwards, because I want to talk to you too, and I don't want to miss seeing you as well. So cue the video.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about this tonight. And I can't claim to be an expert, definitely not, but I am very passionate about perinatal mental health. And I suppose I want to talk to you really about why I thought it would be a very good idea to put together a book on perinatal mental health for midwives and student midwives. So I want to take you on a bit of a journey. So you can see a picture here, and that's of my daughter. And part of my experience in perinatal mental health is through lived experience, through both my daughter and my stepdaughter. And this picture here, and I'm not showing her face, so she'll be absolutely fine with it, is a picture of my daughter a few years ago when she was going through a hypomanic episode. And she had lovely long hair. And through this hypomanic episode and being very impulsive, she shaved everything off. And this was after some psychiatric inpatient admissions. And I really came to learn through this lived experience of caring for somebody with a mental health illness that actually sometimes mental health can be very loud, and you can really see those symptoms manifesting through that illness. But sometimes equally it can be very silent, and you might not always realize that somebody is going through internal struggles on a day-to-day basis. And that was really a big learning curve for me. And also, like with any illness, sometimes lots of people can fall in between. So I think that mental illness, physical illness equally is important. And it really got me thinking, because sometimes I felt very helpless and I didn't know what to do. And I thought about these young women, and I thought about their mental illness, and I thought about lots of young women who might have mental illness, and actually young men too, who one day might want to become fathers. Young women might want to become mothers. And as a midwife, I thought, well, what can I do just to maybe help a little bit, just to help women feel maybe more supported and help get the word out a little bit more about perinatal mental health. And that's when I thought, okay, so perhaps a book might be a good idea. And this is the result of that. So it was written in collaboration with definitely lots of experts, including Judith, who's online with us today. And I thought I would give you a bit of an overview of what's in this book and what's included in it. Because I think that probably some of it is what you would expect. So an overview of perinatal mental health illnesses, and that includes eating disorders and personality disorders and other severe mental illness, and also medications used to treat perinatal mental illness, because I think as midwives quite often there seems to be a lack of training around this, and that's something that seems to come up time and time again. And so I think understanding, just having a very basic understanding of the types of medication that are used to treat illnesses associated with mental health, is really important. And also, and Judith will talk more about this a bit later on, psychological concerns. So looking at the different areas in pregnancy where women might experience phobias or perhaps have had previous losses and previous traumatic births. And I think it's worth saying at this point that actually, for some births, sometimes what a midwife might think, oh, that was a really lovely birth. For a woman, there may be elements of that might be traumatic. And I think it's really subjective. And I think that we all have to remember that. And also things like complex social factors that might contribute to perinatal mental illness. And I think if we think back to the Membrace report in 2019, which highlights approximately 549 women died between 2015 and 2017, and 20% of those women were known to social services. So again, all of these factors contribute to perinatal mental illness. I think there's a chapter in this book as well that captures really beautifully cultural perspectives, and really talks about not just different cultures, that's really important, but also that some women aren't happy after they've given birth. Because I think in lots of societies there's this expectation that women should feel happy after giving birth. They should feel happy because they have a new baby, but for some women that's just not the case. And this chapter written by Kathy Ashwin really addresses that, and it's a really lovely chapter to read. We also include a little bit on the parent-infant relationship and how mental illness can impact on that. And we bring fathers in here as well, and that's really important because we know that there's an RCOG report telling us that actually many men, fathers, experience anxiety and depression after babies are born, but there's a lack of resources there to support them. So that was another thing that was really important to include. And then this is, I love this chapter, it's Midwifery Toolkit. So for all the midwives out there, because actually all of us at some point will come into contact with women who may be affected by perinatal mental illness. And I think it's really important that we have something that we can go to that will actually help inform our practice. And this chapter is all about that. So looking at how to support women during the antenatal, intrapartum and postnatally too. And I think fundamentally, we look at the psychological aspect of intrapartum care, thinking about things like expectation, control and outcome. And those form a large part of the discussions in that chapter. And also Anna Madeley, who contributed to this chapter too, talks about creating a safe space for birth during this chapter. So there's also, we also thought it was really important to think a little bit laterally as well, and think about other factors that might contribute to the development of mental illness or increased anxiety. And we were lucky enough to have Professor Damien Riggs, who wrote a chapter, co-authored a chapter, looking at experiences of midwifery care, both positive and negative, for men, trans, masculine, and non-binary people. And actually, in that chapter, you get a real sense of how some people feel going through that pregnancy continuum. And some people do feel very isolated and alone. And it massively depends on the midwifery care that you receive. And the last chapter really focuses on extraneous factors that might contribute to, perinatal mental illness. So there's lots in the media about perinatal mental health, which is a good thing. And two things that we just can't ignore are COVID-19, and I think, importantly, social media. COVID-19, from my own research that I conducted during the pandemic, during the first and second wave, where we conducted a mixed methods design, and through an interim analysis, we looked at that qualitative element. And women really spoke to us about how they felt. And, women were feeling very isolated. They were feeling alone. They were very worried about what might happen to them during labour. If they had COVID, would they actually receive any care? Some women talked about how their partner might feel detached and did feel detached because of restrictions put in place by the hospital to help prevent the spread, the viral transmission of COVID-19. And also Black and ethnic minority women found it really scary that they were hearing all of these news reports saying, that they were increased risk of being hospitalised from COVID-19. And if you think back to that time during the first and second wave of COVID, it was a really scary time for pregnant women and also for everybody who was working in the NHS. I know that I felt very scared sometimes, especially during that first wave where we knew nothing about COVID. So that also factors into this chapter. And also social media, which can be massively positive, but actually we know that it can also be quite damaging. So things like isolation, and for young women especially, body image, things like cyberbullying, and actually feeling inadequate when you're comparing your life to what you're seeing on social media, which is quite often, a virtual life that doesn't really represent what's happening in reality. So that's basically an overview of the book, and there's lots of clinical practice points and top tips, and also a section on how midwives can look after themselves as well, and a little copy of it right here, so there you go. So really just to finish off, I suppose, and I'm sure many of you watching this will know this already, but I think it's always good to bring this back and look at the scope and the enormity of perinatal mental health and perinatal mental illness. So women can develop mental health issues for the first time during pregnancy. And I think that's something that's so important to be aware of, because actually, as a midwife, it might be the first time that this woman is disclosing something to you, how she's feeling about her own mental health. And it's such, it's so powerful to enable somebody to be able to do that. 1 in 5 mothers suffer from anxiety and depression in the antenatal period or the first year after birth. Again, that's a huge amount of women suffering from depression and anxiety. 1 in 1,000 women develop postpartum psychosis, and that risk is increased with existing mental illness. And again, for women where they feel like they've got to hide things because there's still a huge stigma in some cultures surrounding mental health, you might be, as a midwife, that first point of contact where you can, talk to the woman and really find out what's going on for her, and actually also talk to the families as well and provide that holistic care. So I think it's really key to say that midwives can play a huge role in supporting women, especially as part of the wider multidisciplinary team. And what I've learned as well through my own experiences of mental illness is that sometimes you can't fix things. And it's not always about fixing things, but it's about acknowledging and validating, and sometimes just listening and nodding and holding somebody's hand. Sometimes that's all you need to do to make somebody feel empowered enough to talk about their mental health and how they're feeling. And that's the same for fathers who might experience that low mood and depression. And on postnatal visits, again, you might be that one person who that father, that mother feels that they can talk to. So I just want to leave you with a final thought. This is not new. It's very old, actually, but it's something that I come back to all the time, because people will forget what you said, forget what you do, but actually, and I think this is absolutely key in validating and acknowledging how people feel. They will never forget how you made them feel. And as midwives, I think that, we're probably already very aware of that. How we make women feel, how we make families feel, how we build those relationships is so important. Thank you for listening.
So I'm going to be talking today about Raham project, which is something very, very dear to me. So I wanted to share what we've been doing with that platform with you all. So I'm going to initially go through a little bit of an introduction of who we are, what our aims are, and just a few more interesting details. So this is our second annual report that shows the activities that we've carried out in Raham project between April 21 and March 22. So we're a grassroots organisation and we began in July 2020, and I am very excited to share that, in August we registered as a community interest company formally, and this was a really big step for me because I'm not a business person by nature. I am a midwife by nature, and I've had a steep learning curve through doing all of this, but it was something that my community really needed, and I felt like this would really help them, so that's why we did what we did. What are our aims? So this is going to look a little bit about what our aims are. So Raham Project's aims are to create a safe space that's non-judgmental, particularly for mothers and partners from ethnic backgrounds. We want to start creating a space where things represent our communities a little bit more. So we've started creating digital media content around the perinatal period, where we use key messages and images representative of people from within our communities in a very kind of easy to understand way. And with this, what I found is actually lots of people are accessing it, not just necessarily people from our ethnic communities. There's lots of mothers from, Caucasian communities who come and tell us, nobody told us that. I wish I'd known that before. So I feel like it's spreading wider than I was planning, which is always a positive. Creating a support network is really key for us. So something that we started doing a couple of months ago was we created our own Facebook group. That's a private Facebook group run by mothers from ethnic communities for mothers from ethnic communities. Raham Project actually started during COVID, so social media was our way to connect with families, and obviously it was something that clearly was needed, so we've continued to grow. Awareness. We're trying to raise awareness about the perinatal period. We really want to, focus on maternal mental well-being. And I'm a huge believer that we could prevent a lot of the trauma that our families are suffering through good education, really good support during their pregnancies. And I feel like, we can help with that. Another aspect to that is raising cultural awareness training for healthcare professionals. So it's not just about looking at how we can support people who are having babies. It's also about making sure that the people who are providing the service are also mindful and aware of the nuances that people within my culture face. So it's bringing both of them together. I think that's really, really important for me. And I guess that puts me in a really valuable position, being a midwife who sees how the services work, and also being somebody who's grown up within my local community, and I've known how my communities have networked and they've taught me their ways of life. So I think marrying them two would be really powerful for a lot of families out there. All of the information that we gather together from Raham Project, we use that to feed back to our local maternity neonatal system. And that helps them try to, shape our local services, which I think is really important, that we have our voices raised in a way that we can start creating real change in a system for them. And something that's come a little bit later down the line for us is advocacy. And I think this is a really key thing for us, actually. When families come to us and they engage with us, it's about understanding that culturally, often there's a lot more hand-holding required. So that can be simple things like reconnecting them to maternity services, supporting them raise their concerns, sitting there and listening to them. If they really asked and they wanted us to turn up to an appointment with them, we would. But we have a key aim of making sure we're closing this loop. Maternity services have the power because they are the biggest organizations that provide maternity care to families. So they need to understand that there are service users who have a need, and if they're not feeling comfortable speaking up for themselves, then they've got other people like us to help support them. But it's really important that they're listened to. So how have we achieved the aim? So I've probably mentioned a few of these already. Social media is a really big way that we kind of target our communities. And some of the things we've started doing with our digital resources is we're trying to make them more reachable by creating them in languages that our local community understands. So Midwifery and Urdu are two very commonly spoken languages within our Peterborough-based community. So we have started using that, and I'm hoping that as time progresses, that our longer term goal would be looking at, securing funding so that we can start doing that in other languages, which would be really, really, really good, I think. Our listening events are offered every month, so we consistently offer an online listening session to mothers that wish to join and share their maternity care experiences in a safe and non-judgmental space. And we promote them every month for families to join. And as we've consistently stayed there, I think we've developed this trusting relationship, and people are beginning to hear about us, and people are coming to join and share their experiences with us. Signposting and advocating for families has become a very important thing, like I said, about raising their concerns and their voices and making sure that they have that support there to be able to share what they're feeling. And I've already mentioned the Facebook peer support group. Now, this is just some interesting information about our social media. So we've had like a 50% growth in the last year, which means lots of people have started following us and accessing us. And these are some of the infographics that we've created in recent times. And these are some of the ones that people really have wanted to see more kind of content in this sort of format. I want to say thank you to all of the other organizations that are out there and have supported us in our social kind of world and shared our content. And since January, when we started creating these more more representative infographics, we've had lots of organizations come to us to ask to use these in their hospital areas or their birthing centers. And I think it'd be fantastic if they could be shared as widely as possible, because we need this sort of information out there for families and also for staff to have as well, because a lot of the people that come to us are actually midwives who have just qualified or student midwives. I'm going to skip all the way down now, just to our listening events, which I think are really important. If anybody wants to see the rest of this report, you can find it as our pinned post on our Facebook page on Raham project. And the couple of slides that we've just skipped through talk about the kind of information we've created. So I'm just going to, like I said, skip through that and go straight to our listening events. This is something that we do every month, and we've hosted 8 in the last year, and we've had about 20 people turn up to them and share their stories. And every single mum that comes to us, we offer them all one-to-one support if they want to sit and have a chat afterwards, or if they want to just debrief about anything, or if they want any extra support, any signposting, any connecting, we ensure that we're there for them. And a lot of mothers who have come to us have often said, I would quite like to talk to somebody about what happened to me, because I feel maybe it wasn't right, or maybe I want a debrief, or that is a good outcome for us, because I don't think ethnic minority women's or women's and families' voices are not collected very well from hospital kind of feedback forms. And I think there's lots of reasons for that, but it's not happening as well as it could be. So I'm really grateful that a lot of these mums are feeling brave enough to speak out about them. And this then brings me on to some of the feedback that families have given us. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the stories that they've shared with us. I won't go through them all because there's quite a lot on there, so you can feel free to go through them kind of in your own time. And these are mothers from all over the UK. Although we're based in Peterborough and a lot of the stories are from around Peterborough, Cambridgeshire area, we've ended up connecting with mums from Leicester, Birmingham, Nottingham, Newcastle. So it's been really amazing how many mums have caught on to the fact that, we can come and speak here and we feel comfortable. So this was one of the mums who shared her story with us. With my first baby's labour, I felt anxious. I was in pain and screaming. The midwife was sniggering and making fun of me, saying, "What will you be like during your actual birth?" Staff who came in saw my headscarf and kept asking, "Do you speak English and do you understand what I'm saying?" If they made an effort to glance at my notes, they would have seen I didn't need a translator. The doctor came in as I was half dressed and not wearing my hijab. He just knocked and then barged in. I called out to say, "Just a minute," but he didn't wait. And this is one story of many stories that we hear. And actually, a lot of the common themes are feeling unsupported, feeling unheard, feeling like they were being judged or discriminated because of the way that they looked. Particularly, I've heard a lot from women who wear hijabs actually that there's not this awareness about how important modesty is for this community who chooses to wear a hijab. And so I think there needs to be a bit more awareness from service providers about these sort of things that are very important to these families. We often hear of families talk about how we would have preferred a female practitioner. And some have been mocked by staff about this, the NHS, you don't get to choose that kind of stuff in our country. And to be fair, that's slightly racist as well. This is everyone's country. But a lot of themes have come up that I've sat and I've listened to and realized that more needs to be done for our services. So I feel like, in the wake of the Ockenden report and in what March with Midwives that Maddie was speaking about have been saying, because essentially there's a lot of crossover with both those things. I think the key fundamentals are we need to listen to the service users and we need to nurture them and nurture the people that care for them. It's about bringing both of these things together. And so I'm going to scroll past the rest of the stories. There's about, I would say about maybe about 12, 13 on there that you can have a look at if you want to. But I'll move forward to some of the other key achievements that we've had. So we hosted our first birth time documentary screening, which was a really big deal. I am going to say I'm very human about life. I'm a mum. I run this organization. And as everyone has loads of competing priorities, I also work clinically. So for me, it's always hard to find the time to do these sorts of things. So this was my first step into wanting to start doing community engagement in person. So it was very successful. We had about 45 tickets sell and lots of people came from different backgrounds and different communities. And it was such a lovely space to share, just to talk about birth and reflect on what's actually happening in our current, maternity care systems. So that was a real win for me that day. In the last year, we've had about 105 mums connect with Raham Project, and we've linked about 25% of them, so a quarter of them, to relevant further support, which I think is, again, another win for us. Regarding our advocacy, one of the things I've started noticing more and more over the last couple of months is there are mothers, and these are some of the examples that we shared where we've supported them, who are in patients in maternity units, and this is all over the UK actually. So not necessarily down to just one area, but they're in patients, yet they are calling us for information. And could you just explain what this word means? Or could you just, go through what this might mean? And actually, I feel like we must be failing people if they are under the roof of a maternity care system and they're having to come speak to people outside of that to find information when they've got skilled professionals all around them. So I hope that just gets people to reflect. And I know it's really busy and I know it's really hard. Just pause and sometimes just, engage in a conversation, just take that little bit longer, just to make sure people have asked all the questions that they want to ask and give them the space to guide the conversation as well, as opposed to leading it how you need to as a healthcare professional. And last but not least, our other achievements. These are all of the other kind of organizations that we've ended up linking with and doing a bit of work with. We were nominated for 2 awards, which we're very proud of, and we were shortlisted and runners up for each of them in our first year of existence. So I feel like this is, just the start of what we've been doing. And I'm hoping we're going to move forward and create real, cultural change in our local maternity area. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you for listening, Sue.
How fantastic. After listening to Michelle and Faiza, I really think how much midwives can do and what forces of nature these women are. Fantastic. It's just reminded me I need to go and get that book from Michelle. And also I wanted to say Faiza won and her Raham project won a special award this week. So we're going to invite her back a bit later in the series to tell us all about what she's up to, because things won't stand still at all for Faiza. She's very much that force of nature. Now, I'm going to take chair's privilege here, because I don't have another speaker. It's going to be me. So I hope you're going to stay for a little bit longer with me, and so I can share a little bit of what I've been thinking about over the last few days, because I've been thinking about the International Day of the Midwife, and I was thinking we ought to think about, because the theme was 100 years of history. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I thought, well, we're that history. So I gathered my thinking. And I'm going to show you my slides, because I have some slides. And here they are, 100 years of progress. There. This was my starting point. And I started thinking about how we could sum it up and how we could really feel that International Day of the Midwife. So I had a little think. And this is what I was sort of coming up with, really. And when you think about history, you think about these, well, you can see in this slide, the redoubtable women that started the movement to legislation in the UK in 1902. The group, there was the Institute of Midwives that later became the Royal College of Midwives, and what a redoubtable group of women they were, and how they had to be to get the legislation through, which brought us standards, education, and the practice that we have today. Obviously not the same then, but that was the groundwork they did. And I found these other wee pictures of older midwives. Well, they weren't old, they probably were younger than me now, but a midwife on the bicycle, she had all her equipment for inhalation analgesia in that little black box at the back, which I thought was rather fine. Must have been very difficult. Nowadays, we just pop it in the back of the car and off we go. But in those days, you had to use your own legs to move about, and it must have been very hard. And then we've moved a bit closer to our own time. And I rather like this picture. These student nurses, I think, because I think in this particular era, which I think was probably 1950s, you would not have had male midwives. So I know it's a nursing clip, though of course nowadays we do have male midwives, and we do learn all the things that we would have learned as nurses before we became midwives, i.e. like the skeleton. And then we have a picture of neonatal care, and you can see the great big pipes of oxygen, or tanks of oxygen standing by. And again, we're very fortunate because we have all that piped into the hospitals, mostly where we're practicing. It's much more easy. So things have changed a lot. So we have all the things like blood transfusion, antibiotics, that these people right at the beginning didn't have. And the growth of midwifery education shows how our practice developed alongside, because right at the beginning of the century, we could get through a course within 3 months, get all our knowledge in 3 months, have a 3-hour written examination, a little bit of a 15-minute viva, conducted obviously by an obstetrician, and you get your certificate. 3 months, can you imagine now? And then it moved to 6 months and a certificate, and then a year for non-nurses, and then to this idea of 2 parts of the training. And you will have met colleagues who might have done this part 1 and part 2 midwifery education, where you did a 6-month period in a hospital and then 6 months in the community. Very different. And then in 1968, it was 1 year for nurses. So the nurses would do their 3-year training and then a year's top up, or a 2-year direct entry. And it stayed about the same until the 1980s, really. Now, I've put this picture. This is me as a nurse, and it occurred to me as I was talking to some midwife colleagues of mine, and we got talking about history, and we started talking about hats and strings, and these little bows under my chin were my strings. And they were not attached to the hat at all. They had to be strung up underneath the hat. But I was very proud of my hat and very proud of my strings. And this always reminds me, this image, that I wasn't set out to be a midwife. I never wanted particularly to be a midwife. I was going to be a surgical nurse. I wanted to be a surgical sister. And at that time, in order to get any further up in the hierarchy, you had to do your midwifery. So a lot of people did the nursing, then went off and did midwifery, and then came back into nursing. And I did my midwifery. Here I am. This is quite a long time ago. Still with hats, notice, and very task-driven. It was a time of enemas for women before they started labour, of shaving, pubic shaving, and then the ubiquitous 2-minute each side breastfeeding, which we called demand feeding, because the baby could demand it as often as he wanted, but it was basically you fed the baby 2 minutes each side for the first couple of days, and then you moved to 3 minutes and 5 minutes, which must have been terribly frustrating for those poor babies and for the mothers. But we thought we were doing the right thing, and we were trying desperately to give really good care. The good thing about that time was we had a lot of practical learning and a lot of problem solving in practice, though we didn't have as much theoretical information, because there was no theory at that point that was used very much. We didn't have research much in that at that time. That just shows how old I am, my dear listeners and watchers. But I enjoyed my training, but I wasn't going to stay as a midwife. And then suddenly I found, actually, I went back to nursing for a wee while, and I really missed it, because it was very different, very different being a midwife and a nurse. And that's not to say being a nurse was less autonomous, though I think it probably was at that time. It was just very different. I missed the mothers, I missed the babies, and I missed supporting women, and not just during labour and having their babies, but also through the antenatal period and the postnatal, which was always my love, because I think women need so much confidence at that time and so much understanding of that baby. And it's a wonderful, wonderful time. And these images are taken from when I was working in Weymouth in Dorset. Some of you will have heard of it. And we really did have true continuity of care there, because I could work in the morning in an antenatal clinic. By lunchtime, I might be in the delivery suite. It was a very small ward. And then I might be doing postnatal by the afternoon. It really was like that. And that was wonderful. Really enjoyed it. We knew our women very well. We knew the babies very well. And at that time, then I did my advanced diploma of midwifery, and I was introduced to research. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That really opened my eyes to a very different way of working and thinking, and a huge amount of confidence. Those of you who are very lucky, who've been training recently, will have had all that lovely knowledge right from the start. But for me as the midwife, being introduced to questioning everything we did, and knowing that there was some research somewhere, and for some things there wasn't research, but some things there were, it was a huge eye-opener and really, really exciting. And I just remember that feeling of excitement. Now, the other picture at the bottom with me in a very long frock, this doesn't mean I was a midwife in Victorian times. We decided at Christmas, or I kind of decided, it was kind of my idea, that we'd dress up and do something different at Christmas. Because in those days, we used to do that sort of thing. I'm not sure we have all the time and the energy to do it these days, but maybe you'll tell me I'm wrong. So in the 1990s, surprise, and very much surprise to me, because I was never going to be I wasn't going to be a midwife first, and then I wasn't going to be a teacher. And suddenly I found I wanted to become a teacher, and I became a teacher. And then I got involved in designing one of the first direct entry midwifery courses in the country. There were 7 started. And at that time, there was only one course in the whole country for direct entrant midwives. One course. Everything else was for the shortened course. And at that time, we had to work with a higher education university in order that our students, and this is my first lovely group of student midwives undertaking the direct entry course, becoming higher education diplomates. It was very exciting. And it was a time when we were moving and we were teaching about research at that point. And it was a very exciting time. And the picture on the left of the screen is my wonderful colleagues who were in practice. We worked very closely together. One of the lovely things was teaching in the classroom, and then I might be called to do an antenatal clinic, and that was lovely. Really enjoyed that. And that's very special as a midwife teacher, to be very much part of the clinical scene. Really enjoyed that. And then we come on to the 2000s, and I've got a more modern picture now. You saw the picture of me with a group of 6 of us. That was a whole group of student midwives, 6. And nowadays you'll have a huge group. You might have 50, you might have 60, much, much bigger. But I know that my teacher colleagues really try to make sure that the experience students get is as individual as it can be and as rich as it can be. The other thing is there's been huge growth of masters and PhD possibilities for midwives. We have many midwives now who've got PhDs, and what a delight that is, because that means they've got the confidence. They've also got the drive to move midwifery questions into research, which is really important. We then had, actually at that point, a little bit before that, we had the Winterson report on changing childbirth, and that brought in continuity of care for women and families. And you'll remember that from many weeks we've had on the maternity hour, we've talked about continuity a lot. It's not necessarily a new thing. It's something women have wanted for a long time, midwives have wanted for a long time. At that point, we had increasing home birth, we had more continuity of care schemes and projects. Though I have to say at that time, many weren't funded. We were just moving things around to try and squeeze a project in. So you had a continuity of care group, or you had a group practice working, a home birth group, and you just had to work within what you had. And it worked until people left, and then, you know, workload took over a little bit and people got pulled into the labour ward, which never works very well. And then we've had increasingly more direct entry midwives, and now we have more than the shortened programme, which is the way it should be. It's a much more effective way of training and educating midwives, and it's really lovely to see. Of course, in those 2000s, we've had more visibility of midwives in the media, and that's because I think the professional bodies were much more visible, and people are very interested in midwives. You can see the Call the Midwife drama. People love it because midwifery is such a wonderful job. You and I know it's a wonderful job. Women are interested in it, men are interested in it, people are interested in it, and we need to use that to really share the joy of midwifery, not just the difficulties we have. And of course, then we had the Better Births report. Now that followed a big national review of maternity care, asking women and families what they wanted from maternity services. A little like the Changing Childbirth report, only even more so. And what they wanted were the same sort of things. They wanted continuity. They wanted more choice about where they gave birth. They wanted more choice about home births, and they wanted to have a say in everything. So that's where we came from. Now, of course, my brain starts moving on to textbooks and history, because you will know that I'm editing at the moment this large book, The Maze Midwifery, by my side at all times, and I just wanted to share. Well, when I was training, we had a very thin textbook, and it didn't have half as much as they have now. You look at the thickness of that, it's a big book. They get bigger and they change with knowledge and practice, and they have materials online. And I have to say, they're not just for students, they're for midwives, they're for people who are interested in maternity care, because they've got lots of information that people can use. And I'm always surprised when students want to sell them after they do their course, because I always kept mine, and especially my dictionary, very, very handy as a qualified midwife, actually. So coming up to 2019, 2022, well, what happened? Well, COVID hit us. And hasn't it changed our lives? And I know folk want to go back to normal, whatever normal is, but it has changed. And we're going to have to look very much at the taken for granted now, and use some of the things that we've learned over that period to ensure quality care. Because some of the things we've tried out, because we've had to, actually are much more effective. Women like them. Students like them, midwives like them. So we need to be quite creative, but we also need to be quite careful about choosing what we keep and what we go back to normal with. And we need to keep the learning. And of course, at that time, I know that the birth and maternity hour has started, because we started with the pandemic, and the festivals that we were doing very much face-to-face have become very much hybrid. We're moving back to face-to-face, but there still is a hybrid element, which means that everybody can access wherever they are. Even if they're working, they can access. And as you know, everything's recorded to help that by. So we're quite an interesting time in our history. We have a whole series of reports of poor care, of poor leadership and lack of communication, especially the most recent one from Donna Ockenden this year, that gives us a lot of messages of things we need to do, and we need energy to do these things. We also, a huge thing we have to do is challenge the disparity in health outcomes for Black and brown women and babies. Huge problems. And that starts from doing some of the things in the curriculum, even the images that we use. And we've found this, Gail Johnson and I, when we've been looking at the Maze Midwifery, it's very difficult to get proper images so that we balance and we make sure that anyone who is learning has that knowledge of what's appropriate for women of colour and what's appropriate for white women, and what we can do to make the care more equal and better for all, but certainly to make it more equitable for our Black and brown women and babies. And we will learn and develop from the bad reports, and we hopefully will get some good reports which might balance those out. And we do need to focus on great leadership. We have got some fantastic leaders in midwifery. We need more, and we need to acknowledge that leadership isn't just the people at the top, it's all the way through the profession. And we need to nurture people. We nurture them right from the maternity care support workers to the student midwives to the more clinical midwives, teachers. Everybody needs to really unleash their leadership potential and really work on that. We need to focus so much on what women and families want, using things like the better birth, the best start, but also we must listen to women. We must listen to what they want and what works for them, because each woman, each family needs something a bit different, and we need to really do what we've said for years, we do individualized care. We really need to come up to the plate and do that now. We need to really work on continuity of care, because that's the most safe and personalized care you can get. But obviously you need good staffing levels for that, because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to do. And that's been made very clear. And I know that the transformation program have really emphasized that in order to get your building blocks for your continuity models, you must have enough staff. We need to develop our research and apply it and use the evidence in maternity care and services for the women and the babies in our care. We also need to develop our interprofessional team working, and I know in many units that works very well. and people are kind of puzzled when another trust isn't working so closely, but we don't take it for granted. We need to keep working at it. And we also need to look at our workplace culture, making it better, retaining our midwives, our students and our support staff, and making the environment a really nourishing, learning, good place to be for our workforce, but also for the women and the families. We need it to feel welcoming and warm and friendly all the way through. Now, we've been 100 years of progress. I've scampered through it and I've really focused on my own part in my own little history, but you might want to do this for yourself. Now, I've got marvelous midwives here, and these are only some voices and faces of midwifery. I just started thinking about the people who've impacted on me and my practice and my knowledge. And this is just a fragment of them, actually, because as I was putting these down and seeing these phases and thinking, oh, yes, I remember Billy Hunter, the Tale of the Midwife, and I can remember Tracy talking about the continuity, and Marlin talking about technology, and Carleen being such a brilliant politician, and Stephanie there with her baby, because she always talks about you need to focus on the baby. And then the wonderful Catherine Guttridge last week, fantastic, how fantastic she was. Each of these midwives has given something special and has a special voice, just as you do there, as you're listening and watching me. If you do this for yourself, do you just see how many wonderful midwives there are that you can put on your screen and you can think of, these people really matter? Because as I was doing this, I was thinking, how lucky are we as midwives to have such tremendous people? And I'm emphasizing, because just in case you know me and you're not on here, it's not because you're not marvelous. It's because I was running out of space and I had a limited time to do this. And I'm going to add to this, and I'm going to make it bigger and bigger, and I'm going to share it with you a little bit later in the series, just so you can see, because I think it's going to become so that each little picture is tiny, but the impact they have is enormous. And I want to thank all of these wonderful midwives and all of you midwives for joining me this evening, because it's been fantastic for me to sort of reminisce and think about what matters to me and how I've got here in this bit of the history. And this is a bit of my history as well. And I always smile when I see this, because these are my Macedonian babies. When I did a project in Macedonia, and they were getting the babies, they were just cleaning the nursery and put all the babies in a lovely little bundle together before they went off to see the mums. And it just made me feel nothing really changes for us here. And I wanted just to emphasize to each of you that it's important, just as I'm sort of, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see. Can I see you all? I can see, well, you can see me. I can't see all of you. But I think it's important, as we're looking at the International Day of the Midwife, we celebrate what it means for each one of us as a midwife to be that midwife. It's easy on a day-to-day basis. You're busy, you're rushing, you're skipping your lunch because you haven't got time to eat. You're trying to cover someone else's workload and working tremendously hard. Just take a minute and think about, what is the most joyful thing about being a midwife? What do you love about being a midwife? And what is close to you? And if you had that little board of midwives, who would you put there? And that I'm going to set that as a little bit of homework for you tonight, just to spend some time thinking, because this is what having an International Day of the Midwife is, because that's just mostly UK midwives. If I go and then start looking at international, that whole panel is going to be massive, massive. Now, I'm coming to the end of my little spiel, and I want to wish you a happy International Day of the Midwife. I want to remind you and say a big thank you to Matflix for looking after us, and for Amy, who's looked after me today with her editing and filming and timing, kept me to time. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone for coming along this evening. You'll have some resources there available on the website, and this will all be available on Facebook also on Friday. Now, next week on Maternity and Midwifery Hour, we're going back to kind of normal, and we're going to be doing a bit of a career spotlight, and we're going to have a little bit of how to plan careers. And it doesn't matter if you're halfway through your career or even at the end, you'll learn something, and we'll have someone talking about how they've got into their role too. And I'll tell you more about that a little closer to the time. Now, I need to also remind you, on the 8th of June, there's a personalised maternity care building on Ockenden whole festival conference, which is led by Dr. Claire Feely, but also has the lovely Baroness Cumberledge, has Maria Booker, Joan Crawford, Anna Madeley, Tracy Cooper, Becky Westbury, all men of people. It's going to be a fantastic day. If you can make it, book in now. Otherwise, in the north, Manchester, 21st of June is the next Maternity and Midwifery Festival. And again, register. It will be available online, but if you want to come face to face, we've got some really delicious things that you can only really enjoy face to face. And I'm not just talking about coffee and cake. And also Wales and Southwest is on the 13th of September. So to pop that in your diary as well. And just in the meantime, I'll say thank you again for coming this evening. Have a lovely day tomorrow. And I must refer you to the virtual International Day of the Midwife. Now there's a link on the resources sheet. You go straight in, and they are having something at 8 o'clock. So that's in about a minute. And in the meantime, do stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week.
Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Feely, midwife, researcher and lecturer at King's College London. I'm delighted to share with you an upcoming event, a conference devoted to personalised maternity care on Wednesday, the 8th of June. Learning from current practice with birthing women and people's needs centred, we will explore how personalised maternity care can be facilitated. Safe care is personalised care. Therefore, to support the implementation of the immediate and essential actions, this programme will share insights from national, regional and individual trusts, as well as individual maternity practitioners. Sharing from all levels of the maternity system, this conference adopts a whole systems approach to making personalised care a reality for all. A must-attend programme for senior maternity and midwifery managers, clinicians, trust governors, risk managers, academics, researchers, regulators and safety and clinical excellence groups, as well as charities, all tasked with implementing improvement to maternity care in the UK. We look forward to seeing you there.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, we can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today.
Box sets are now available via Open Athens and other international federated access with library institutional subscriptions packages at £1,950 a year. Individual subscriptions are also available at £8.99 a month and just £4.99 a month for students.
Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.
challenge to you is to join that effort. Let's not throw up our hands, and there are many people that throw up their hands, when it's time to roll up our sleeves. Because years from now, this moment will pass. And our children and our grandchildren, if you haven't got children and grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, your friends' children, will ask, where were you when the stakes were so high?
What I would say to people in relation to going forward in midwifery or in nursing, it's all about communication, collaboration, communication and negotiation.
The future. What would I like is for us to have national guidelines for pregnancy, labour, birth and postnatal care. Not for it to be itty-bitty throughout, no matter what area you're in, it's slightly different.
The impact that early losses were having on women and parents, and also in terms of the sort of wider family, friends, social networks of women and couples. So I created a series of short videos of each of these technical skills here in the list, from handling the instruments to all the knots that they need to learn. And so the students could follow along and learn.
We know that when you have a healthy mother, you have a healthy infant. All of the research and data tells us so. So ensuring that mothers themselves have an adequate iron level is doing something for their children, but also for their future health, well-being and future pregnancies.
As one HCA said, the roles have significantly changed. We're now doing one-on-one care with patients. We're teaching patients. We're doing the baby baths, the demonstrations that cater for a class up to 20 people. We're teaching students now, and our whole role literally now is one-on-one. And it's not about what we're doing. We love what we're doing. It's about what we can't do.
The focus is on getting to a country where it's safe, where you feel safe, and then sometimes it comes about a few weeks later, sometimes months later. And when you're not surrounded by your social support, your friends, your family, these feelings of emotional distress can just manifest themselves at any given moment. And it's really important that as midwives that we engage with perinatal mental health support to help support this vulnerable group of women and birthing people.
The impact of bias and microaggressions is being recognised more and more often as a contributing factor to mothers and babies dying. Training to understand the rates of inequality for both women and babies and impact of bias needs to occur regularly for midwives and other healthcare professionals.
They're aware of the importance of the physiology, that actually the physiology of pregnancy, labour, birth and the early weeks after birth and breastfeeding prime the mother for mothering. They help in the health and well-being of the baby. They reduce pain. They give a sense of social openness. Oxytocin is the hormone of calm and connection. They know that science, but they actually can't put it into practice in the clinical areas. So we have a whole area of our science, which is at the foundation of midwifery, that is called a cult, that's called an ideology. And our work actually will be to put forward that science so that it's understood both a scientific basis and the importance to good care.
Thank you to you for everything that you have done in this space. We've had 2 years of a time that you never ever could have imagined, 2 years of a pandemic. Who could have imagined that we would have lived through something like this? But we have, you have, and I just want to say a huge thank you for everything that you have done.